a minimum of 3 years. Now, given that we're not roof inspectors, you can note that the roof is visibly worn, but we are to assume, given that there's no leaks on the inside, that this property has at least 3 years of remaining life. And you can note that to cover yourself in your addendum. Now this is a suggested layout for your reports. Basically, the first 2 items and the last 3 items are mandatory. We want to see the cover page as the first page in every report. The body of the appraisal should come next. These next 4 items, we really do not care which order you put them in, but the last 3 items, your appraisal license, your E&O, and the provided property condition report should be in this general order. The property condition report must always be the last item of every report you turn into us. Now we have a question. Yes, our question is, if we are basing our appraisal on the PCR report only, then is it safe to assume the liability is not on the appraiser? That's exactly correct. HUD, the reason for the PCR is because those items are not on at the time of our inspection. There's no way we can be held liable if we weren't able to test them. So that is the reasoning that HUD is forced to actually have someone else go out there and test those prior to us getting there. Edgar, did you have a question? Okay, we'll move on. These items here are a sample of the cover sheet we like to see. On this cover sheet, you can add all the information that is requested on our reports, which would be an FHA case number, the property address, the client's address, the date of the appraisal, and the appraiser's information. The next page is just a copy of a 1004MC, which everyone should be aware of. These 2 forms, if you haven't completed FHA appraisals or HUD REO appraisals, they aren't typically used in appraisal reports. However, they are both standard forms and available in all forms providers. Normally, if you check your forms library and punch in lead-based paint addendum, 2 different forms will come up. However, this is the one we need. It's the most up-to-date, and it was updated January 1990. The environmental compliance record, if you punch in environmental compliance record, 3 or 4 will come up, but this is the one we need. Now, we're briefly going to go over comparable sales selection. This is more of a HUD REO training as opposed to just general appraisal training. This criteria that I have here, this is pulled directly from the HUD manual, and this is utilized. This criteria was specifically noted for the use of REO sales within a report. However, the requirements they are setting are a great base for selection of any comps. Number 1 would be the comp must be located in the subject neighborhood or within a reasonable proximity. Anytime you stray from that, it has to be explained. Comparable property are subject to reasonable adjustments. None of your comps should have excessive adjustments. If they do, often it's because you're in an area where you have the worst property in the area and you actually have no other comps. So that condition adjustment or cost to cure you're applying to your sales grid is throwing that percentage out of whack, and in which case you would just have to explain that within your report. Each comparable should be sold between a willing buyer and seller. Normally, if the property is listed on MLS, that's going to satisfy that requirement. Sheriff sales should not be utilized. Sheriff sales are pretty much an auction type sale, so you don't have a willing buyer and seller. All comps must be exposed to the market for a reasonable period of time. If you're verifying all your sales with MLS and you're noting that, say for instance, the property has 1 or 2 days on the market, likely that property was already sold before it was placed on the market, and the agent put that property on MLS to make it appear to be an arm's length transaction. Now, unless we are able to determine otherwise, we suggest you don't use sales that have been on the market for a few days, basically 1 to 3, 1 to 7 days. We should be questioning those comps. The 10% line and 25% gross adjustments. Again, if these are all guidelines, if you have to exceed these guidelines, we need an explanation. We need a detailed explanation as to why you had to surpass the guidelines. We request details on all adjustments, especially condition adjustments. Many times from the front picture of the photo that you're providing, all comps look like they're in average condition. However, you noted one to be in good, the other one to be in fair, and you've made adjustments. However, in your addendum, there's no explanation for those adjustments. If MLS told you that one had an upgraded kitchen, then you should be noting that type of information within the report. Lastly, every one of your reports, you should provide a strong reconciliation of your data, meaning your reconciliations should contain your complete thought process in your comp consideration. If comps 1 and 2 were given the most consideration in your report, I want to know why. If they were the most recent sales, the most proximate to the subject, then you are explaining your thought process, and that's the type of explanation or reconciliation that we're looking for. Now we're briefly going to go over what to do in complex or rural areas. Now in complex or rural areas, you should never only utilize 3 sales. The structure in which you should expand your comp selection, number 1, you're going to extend the distance. And you're going to extend the distance parameters because most underwriters want to see recent sales. There's some exceptions to this, and we'll go over them. Next, you're going to extend the time parameters and stay within 12 months. Third, you would extend the GLA variance. Often we're using a 20 to 25% GLA variance for comparables. In certain areas, it's not logical to go 10 miles out to a different area to choose comps, and I'm in total agreement with that. But what you have to do, and this goes back to supplying more than 3 sales in these type of areas, which you're going to want to do is go further out, supply 3 sales that have sold within 12 months, and also supply sales from the general area that maybe have sold 13, 14, 24 months. Now, you can provide sales over 12 months in a report as long as you have corresponding sales that have sold under 12 months. So basically, we want to hit the guidelines and then also provide the sales that were the strongest factors in the subject's value. And this is where the reconciliation of data comes in. If we're using 3 sales that are 20 miles out but have sold within 12 months, and then you use 3 sales that were half a mile out from the same general area that are 16, 18 months, you can reconcile that information and still give your older sales some consideration in your report, if not all consideration in your report. It's just you have to make every effort to meet the guidelines. Anytime you surpass the guidelines, you have to acknowledge you knew what the guidelines were in the report and explain why you had to exceed them. I believe in every one of our order forms, we request sales within 90 days and within a mile. Now, that is a guideline. If you have to exceed it, in your addendum, you should note you are aware of the 90-day and 1 mile criteria. However, it was needed to be exceeded due to the lack of sales. And my sales search, I was forced to include, go along those lines. from there, we are done with the development and the formatting of the appraisal report. We will stop again towards the end to see if we have any further questions. Looks like we have one. 5 are foreclosure sales. What would you use? Foreclosure sales are the market. Now, foreclosure sales are not arm's length transactions. That would be a definite problem. Now, if you're determining, well, you know what? Let's go to Frank. Frank, are you there?
Hello?
Hey, Frank, how's it going? Hello, Frank? Frank, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now, Frank, with your question, if all you have is foreclosure sales, now, where did you verify that there were foreclosure sales?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me, Frank?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I thought I had it on mute.
No, it's okay. Now, I read your question. You have 6 foreclosure sales, and that's all you have?
Yep.
Now, those foreclosure sales, are they foreclosures because they're being sold by a company? So they've been foreclosed upon already? Is it the actual foreclosure of the property?
Yes.
Or is it a company that's selling a house they foreclosed upon?
Not like the bank.
See, now, if the bank is selling it,
Yeah.
and if they're marketing it on MLS, you can use them.
Yeah. It's market sales. Okay.
Okay. Now, what I mean that you can't use a sheriff sale or a foreclosure sale. Now, what that means is a lot of times when a property forecloses back to the bank, there's a value placed on that transaction, and that's not an arm's length value. Often that value is in terms of what was owed on that loan.
Right.
And there's really nobody paying that much for the loan for that property. That's just the transfer amount. But if the bank is selling it, it's considered an REO property, and as long as it meets the criteria we set for REO sales, which was a few pages back in the comp selection, it can be used.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I just wanted to get your input on it.
Oh, no worries. Okay.
Right.
Now, let's see. Do we have any more questions? Okay. Now Dwight has a question in regards to short sales. Short sales, as long as they're noted and listed on MLS, can be used, because by having them listed on MLS, they do fit the criteria. They're being openly marketed. You can determine a marketing time. There is a willing buyer and seller, so they can be used. In some areas, that's all you're going to find is short sales or REO property. So yes, they can be used. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any more questions. Lori, do you have a question? Unmute her. I'm sorry, Lori, are you there? Lori? Okay, and lastly, we're going to go over how to input your appraisal report once it's completed. Now HUD has developed a system called the P260 system. What this does, it's basically a data entry system along with an upload of your appraisal. Now, what we have done, we have digitized this system and made it somewhat of a QC system for you as you upload your appraisal. And what we're going to do in this section, this is